So I've been pretty excited to take a look at the watches that are residing in this bag. In here we've got a couple of new pieces from Christopher Ward. This is a British brand that's made in Switzerland, and according to lots of the bigger YouTubers like Watchfinder and loads of the big watch review sites, these are supposedly the kind of lowest cost luxury watches that you can get. For around 1,000 quid, or sometimes less, sometimes a bit more, you get a watch that, in terms of build quality, supposedly rivals watches that are much more expensive. Now, I've never looked at them before, so I'm keen to give them a try, especially these two, for reasons you'll find out soon enough. It's not often you find this, at least in the watches I normally review. It's almost like tamper-proof packaging. It can only be opened once this piece has been torn off, so I guess you know that if someone has been inside your watch or not, has been peeping at it. Believe it or not, we have actually had watches that we've reviewed be stolen before in the post by, Royal Mail or whatever. So this may come in useful at some point. But yeah, let's take a look at this one first. There we go. It's time. There's the first. And here's the second. Well, it's a very nice unboxing experience, I'll give them that. So these watches are currently both on loan with Christopher Ward. They haven't paid me anything to make this video or the review that I'll inevitably do on these. It looks like they're both in wooden boxes. Oh, kind of. So you have this logo, which is a newcomer for Christopher Ward. We'll discuss that shortly. Wow. So I've encountered some elaborate packaging in my time, no doubt. The Wise Adamascus comes to mind. That had a really, large box, good quality box too. I do think this is perhaps the most luxury feeling unboxing I've been privileged enough to try. I tell you, this is definitely one of the perks of the job. Now this one is the new C63 Sealander GMT. In 36 millimeters. I think the original version is somewhere around 40 mil. This version, given it's the GMT, currently retails for more than the standard dive watch Sealander. This is about £1,000 on the nose with the bracelet. Super smooth, silky smooth crown. That is, I mean, you can see it, you can hear it. That is the smoothest crown I've ever encountered on a watch. But yeah, here's the pretty diminutive Sealander 63 GMT. Straight out of the box, first impressions. I really like the case from side on. I like the case back too. Nice and slim. The case rear is great to look at, not just the movement, which is decent enough. Nothing super elaborate there, but really like the particular style of screw back there. Looks great. The whole thing's just so sleek. Now in terms of design, this is a watch that I don't absolutely love, at least at the moment. I think the new updated logo that they introduced a couple of years back, that looks so much better than the previous text one. And while there's certain parts I definitely like, and I can tell immediately this is an extremely high quality watch, I think maybe it's something about the bezel, maybe the slimness of the bezel just isn't 100% to my taste. I tend to prefer watches just in general with smaller dials and bigger bezels. The bracelet feels decent, but I have seen bracelets that rival this for watches that cost less money, definitely. The clasp itself though is more unique. Now this almost has a curvature, and they seem to mirror the sides of the case there, that sculpted look. Feels like a very custom shape. Unfortunately, you don't get many adjustments with this butterfly style of bracelet. I'm keen to see if this particular shape affects comfort in my full review. The case finishing itself looks absolutely superb. It's kind of at that point where I'm not sure if it can get a great deal better than this with this material. I believe it's 316L steel. I love it when brands do this with their case backs with a very small amount of distance between the rear and the rotor like that. This gives such a flush, neat finish. So that's the Sealander GMT. We will try that on shortly, but for now we've got another one to take a look at, and that is this, the 1236mm, also with a screw down crown. And as you can tell, it does look a fair amount like the Tissot PRX and a number of other integrated bracelet sports watches that we've seen, but I can tell straight away this one has definitely got one of the nicer waffle style dials. And I say waffle style, but that isn't quite the case with this one. You'll notice that most waffle dials have that simple square pattern. This appears to have like a crosshatch pattern instead, which I think looks much better. Those other ones sometimes all have a risk of looking like an AP homage, whereas this one does look distinctly different in some ways. This one's got a much more angular look with those sharp markers and sharp hands, and it looks a lot like one of the Japek sports watches, and I believe that's because it's actually the same designer that now works for Christopher Ward. And the finish is awesome. It's not only got the texture, it's got like a sheen to it too, like a, not a sunburst, but certainly more of a shine. It's not matte by any means. Then this colour is lichen blue, I think they said. Now the case finishing looks just about as good as the last one. The one thing I will say is I definitely don't like the side-on appearance as much as the previous watch. I've always been more of a fan of the swooping styles like this one, because I find that they just conform to my wrist better and leave fewer gaps. This one has an unusual sliced off profile. It's still pretty thin and the case back looks great too, but we'll have to see how it looks on the wrist. The bracelet, that definitely feels, or at least looks nicer than the previous one. It's got the same clasp from the looks of it, and it looks nicely finished. It's actually akin to that on the Tissot PRX, so I'm keen to see how they actually compare in person. And overall, with it being a 36mm watch, I'm keen to see how this stacks up versus the 35mm Tissot in particular, because that sort of size has always been the cutoff for me. 35, even on my wrist, seems to look too small usually, and it confuses me that, you know, Tissot hasn't introduced something like a 37 or 38 version instead. Whereas this 36, I can usually get away with that. I mean, both of these watches, they definitely feel like a step up from the majority of brands that I cover on my channels. Between the two, and I think this one looks like a high quality watch on the left, the Sealander is much more reserved, which might make it a little bit more versatile, but if I was spending a significant amount of money on a watch, because even though these do appear to be very well priced, you know, there's still a lot of money to spend. It's like a month's wage for a lot of people. I'd want something that maybe stood out a bit more, so, you know, something like this would probably be more of my preference. By the way, let's get them sized up and see exactly what proportions these smaller versions have. I'll link both of these watches in the video description, by the way, if you want to check them out and view all the full specs. Across the width, it's about 36.5. It really depends where you measure with both of these, because they've got these quite notable crown guards. Bezel size, bob on 36mm, so maybe that's where it gets its name from. Lug to lug is also very short on each of these, 42.6, yeah. And what really attracts me to this one is the thinness, or at least the perceived thickness, 11.5, yeah. Got to be the thinnest GMT I've reviewed so far. Let's check out the 12. Yeah, with the crown guards it is bigger, 37.1. Without them, maybe about 35.5, yeah. Bezel, again, depends where you measure. It's got like a two-step design, 34.5. And lug to lug, well, there kind of aren't any lugs. And from there to there, the two holes, it's about 36. You have fixed end links. I would guess the lug to lug feels more like about 43, 44 with this one, but we'll have to try it on to find out. 10.3, which is very slim for an automatic. So there's the Sealander to start off with. And this is ringing some bells, you know, some far less expensive bells, admittedly. It looks a lot like the Casio EF-V100 and especially the EF-V110, which was similarly sized to this as well. Same colour scheme, similar hands. Now, obviously, this is a much better quality watch, as you'd expect, but it certainly has those same vibes. Let me know if you think the same, if you've tried that Casio. Overall, looks good. Looks, like I said, pretty reserved. And there's the slimness. It is pretty slim. Definitely not too small for my wrist. Mine is 6¼ inches for reference. Now, here's the 1236. Looks really nice on the wrist, this one, especially from certain angles, just that dial, it looks so cool. Now the only thing I'm not too keen on when it's on the wrist is just how it conforms to the wrist compared to the other one. Just due to that shape, as expected, you're just left with little gaps here and here, which is nothing major, and you may well get that on other integrated link sports watches. I've always more preferred the flusher fit of something like this with that many holes underneath. The only other things we haven't really touched on is the movements and the loom. So in here is supposedly the Sellita SW200. No, that can't be right. This is the Sellita SW330-2. This isn't a movement I have come across or reviewed before, so I'll be keen to see how this one performs. This has up to a 56-hour power reserve, which is quite impressive. The finishing on it is nothing super elaborate, but it does look pretty nice. I also like the rotor too. Inside the 12 is the more popular Sellita SW200, so another Swiss movement. This one I have covered a few times before, again with a very similar rotor. Hopefully the luminescence is good on these. This has a very blue glow. A lot of these watches that are normally called blue are more of a blue-green, to be honest, but this is very much a solid blue, almost purple, at least when the light is on it. Let's get rid of this UV torch and see what we get. Yeah, that's decent. Even the one on the right, actually. Overall, it's strong performance, nothing out of this world. But still, overall, my first impressions of Christopher Ward, very, very good. Clearly built, you know, to offer as much value in mind as possible. Not just to scalp you like the likes of the Tag Kith. Can't believe that people would spend, you know, this much money, actually more than this, to get a plastic watch when you can get something, you know, built as nicely as these pair. It's shocking.